It's funny. I didn't expect to make a video about this. I actually wasn't planning on watching this show. No spoilers. I'm not going to dive into any spoilers or anything, but I definitely think you should check out the Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime on Netflix. It's not too long. It's 10 episodes. All the episodes are pretty short. This just was not on my radar at all for a multitude of reasons. Number one, after Cyberpunk 2077 released, I kind of dropped off of it. I didn't actually think it was the worst game in the world, but I was very burnt out on all the conversation about it, so I really only jumped in again and really only thought about Cyberpunk anything when the updates came and I had to make like videos and research for game ranks. But other than that, that was it. So like the Cyberpunk Edgerunners thing coming out, I was like, okay, but I think it ended up really working out for me because my favorite thing about the game, despite the issues, was Night City. I've talked about that a million times. And this show essentially gives me more of that. It gives me more Night City. It gives me more cyberpunk stuff. And it explores and tells a very different story from the game. One that I think, and I'm not dunking on the game story, but I think does a really good job of kind of outlining Night City and just the situation of this cyberpunk world. The class systems, like the society aspects, the economic aspects, how terrible and awful things can be. And it really blew me away. I jumped into it specifically because of word of mouth. And I think this show is a really good example of, sometimes word of mouth is best. Some friends of mine were saying that it was good, and I was like, really? All right, screw it. I fired it up and was pretty instantly hooked. I think episode 5 or episode 6 is where it like blows the doors down, but I think it's a really, really good progression from beginning to end, specifically because there is a really strong arc focused around the main character that really goes places and is just really satisfying to see completely through and executed. Oh, the other reason I wasn't super interested in, I'm sorry, but like I'm just kind of a casual enjoyer of anime. I've seen all the big ones for the most part, like I just don't really actively seek it out too often unless it's really good and like just really specifically interests me. So, again, another reason why I jumped in, and I'm really glad I did because I'm actually watching it again. I'm watching it through again like immediately after I finished it. It definitely hits you like a ton of bricks, for sure. But it is worth watching from the cool, like really, really disgusting gore to the really beautiful art to the character designs, which I think are downright incredible, and just how the main character has a really cool jacket, but there's story implications behind the jacket, and it kind of looks like V's jacket from 2077, but a little different, a little story spin. All the characters, I think, are really interesting and really lovable, and they all kind of have their ups and downs, and it's really good to see them all go through it. And they cram a lot in a very short little contained season, but in a way that really works because it's fairly simple. Like the story is actually pretty self-contained. It's not like they're fighting to save the world or save Night City or anything really. It's kind of just starts with one small person living in the city, and the city happens to them. And this cyberpunk world, this situation, everything about it happens to them. And then that's kind of the catalyst for everything. And it's a story that's more about this little group of edge runners, these people that just do cyberpunk shit. They do crime, and it really, really sells the small moments with the characters, but also really sells all the implications around modifying your body with, cybernetic and all that stuff. And because it's anime and because of the really incredible art style, it does it in a way that it feels very tangible, and like every upgrade and every person's part and everything just feels really like, oof, you feel it, and you couple that with the gore, which is out of this world. It all just really works, and especially when the action kicks up, which it's actually pretty reserved, and I respect that, but when the action does really kick up, it is buck wild, and you're like, oh, this is why it's an anime. This is why they didn't like try and make a live action show or anything, and it works. So between that, like a really killer soundtrack, I just got a really good kick out of it. The whole arc, and how it's not necessarily like a power fantasy thing like a video game. It's, again, like I said, it's more of just a regular person, and you just see how they get wrapped up in all that mess. because you'd play the game or you'd read into Cyberpunk stuff and you'd hear about these crazy half robotic people, but you never really understand what they were thinking. And you meet all these characters in this world that really kind of flesh that out for you. And again, it's really impressive with how reserved it is. I honestly could have used a couple of more episodes to really, give me a couple of side plots, some more interesting dives into some of the aspects of Night City, but nope, it keeps it super clean and simple, focused on the characters, no bullshit, and really no fluff. And I do think that's good. It's got cool creative elements from the games. It references some things. You'll recognize some locations. There's some music, some sound effects, the weapons that some people use, just the whole thing. But you don't necessarily have had to ever have been into the tabletop game or the video game to enjoy this. And I think that's also another accomplishment. It doesn't feel like this cash grab accessory product attached to marketing the game. This is like a real actual creative thing. And I actually got to learn a little bit about the creative process behind it because on Friends Per Second, the podcast I do with my friends, we actually got the showrunner on the podcast and we asked him a ton of questions about it. And it's just interesting to hear how it got made, but also just how anime is often made and how, European studios will collaborate with Japanese studios. It's very interesting to see how it all went down. And ultimately, the show did kind of make me go and re-download Cyberpunk 2077, and I'm definitely not the only one. You may have seen the headlines that the game is the top of the charts again on Steam and player counts and stuff. People are jumping back in. I did talk on Game Ranks how the newer updates have made the game much better state. I'm always happy for a game to turn it around. Any game that is perceived as bad or a flaw or whatever, it's always really good to see it bounce back and become a net positive, just another good game. And Cyberpunk is definitely on its way. Does this show and the game getting better really forgive some of the way CD Projekt Red handled some of the stuff? Personally, I still have a chip on my shoulder about that, but every consumer, every person feels differently. That aside, I think the Netflix show is just good as hell. Especially refreshing because I think there's a lot of good animation and anime stuff on Netflix. I feel like Netflix just gets dumped a bunch of weird stuff on it all the time. That's not great. But thankfully, this is absolutely a diamond in the rough. It's one of the few times in a show like this where there's an ensemble cast, there's a whole group of quirky characters, and I actually equally like all of them. It's one of the few times, and I always appreciate when there's a really good, thought out, fleshed out character arc that is satisfying to see really pay off. It's a show filled with heart, hope, despair, the shittiness of Night City, a little bit of love. It all just tugs at your heartstrings in different ways. And like I said, it's just visually interesting to watch and kick back with. So ultimately, I can't talk more without talking about spoilers. So I'm actually going to hold off on spoilers because some people out there are like me. They're a little slower to watch things. It takes me a minute. People watch this in a day instantly, and it's not that long. But I got shit to do, man. And maybe you do too. So I'm not going to do spoilers today. Maybe I'll touch on spoilers in a Q&A video, one of those that I do every month. But that's my thing. This is my recommendation for the day. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is certified, tight, it's sick, it's dope. Very surprised, very happy. I listened to my friends and actually jumped in and watched it because otherwise I wouldn't have. I had not a lot of interest. So it is a win, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Who's your favorite character, first of all? Would you like to see another season of this, or are you happy with it as it is? Let's talk. I definitely want to know what you're thinking, especially if you're way more of an anime person. You might have more thoughts about some of the people behind it, from Trigger, the composer, stuff like that. But let's talk Cyberpunk Edgerunners. I definitely think there's a good conversation, so I'll be down there. If you guys like what I'm trying to do here, I just pop on and talk about stuff that interests me, just stuff that I love. Clicking the like button does help me out, so thank you if you're new. And if you subscribe, I don't spam you. I only put out a video once or twice a week, so thank you. Whether you've been here for a week or you've been here for a freaking million years, thank you. I'll see you guys next time. Pizza's on me. Subscribe because video games. That was a really long-winded outro. I'm sorry.